Imagine you're juggling, which we all feel like we're doing in life. We're juggling all of these balls. Is that some of them are going to be glass. They're tasks we can't drop. And where are the plastic balls? Like, where are they that we can drop them and either bounce them and pick them back up?
So what I would hear in terms of coaching clients on our courses, they're all glass balls. So what now? Hello, and thank you for joining us on the Sound Leadership Podcast, the podcast designed for L&D, HR professionals and leaders. Each episode unpacks essential topics to help you solve workplace challenges, create a strong leadership and coaching culture, and gives our practical leadership sound bites. I'm your host, Dan Boniface. Stay tuned, and we hope you enjoy this podcast. With me today are leadership and management experts Laura Bridgeman and Darren Draper. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Hi.
Guys, today we're unpacking time management, and we work with lots of middle and senior managers who struggle to create a good work-life balance. And we also find that lots of managers are taking on other people's work, plus their own work, so they become time poor. So let's unpack time management in the first instance then. So guys, what does time management mean to you?
Time management for me is all about that responsibility that we can look at the calendar and see 30 days, but actually it's how we use those 30 days that are really important. And it's up to us to decide how we want to spend our time. Sometimes we put that responsibility outside of ourselves. We say, well, we haven't got enough time to do that because of A task or B task. And we said in the introduction that managers are taking on other people's jobs or roles or just small pieces of work. But actually that's then taking up time that they could be doing other managerial tasks. So develop people and look at the strategic big thinking. And we have to be aware that how we spend our time is the results that we will deliver. So if we spend our time doing other people's work for them, then their work will get done and ours won't. So it's really important to own how we want to spend our time, take responsibility of where we want to spend our time, and stop giving that time away.
Laura, what does it mean for you?
In my role here, so where I look after our delegates for the BCF Group, it's a mixture between proactive and reactive. So for me, it's about being really conscious of not letting that reactive side of the job and stop me from being proactive. So making sure that I'm, where possible, balancing those things. So the long-term things, the strategy for post-course here, but also making sure, you know, when our delegates get in contact with us, you know, they need a response. So for me, it's about managing that, and through kind of habits and time blocking and a few other strategies that we can kind of dig into later. But yeah, making sure I don't end up overwhelmed at the end of the day with a to-do list that ends up looking more like, you know, a roll of parchment that you would just roll out. So yeah, that's it for me.
There's a danger of that, isn't there, sometimes, where we're working through the day and we've started off with a nice to-do list, which I've got some issues with a to-do list anyway. We'll maybe come on to that a little bit later, but actually our to-do list can grow throughout the day, so there's problems there. So is that something we've seen with our clients?
Yes, definitely. I think the to-do list is a very common kind of hack that people use for their time management. But if it's not done in the right way, it can be overwhelming. It can lead to kind of just purely a list with no sense of priorities, for example. So making sure that the to-do list in itself is actually effective for you and helping you, rather than becoming something additional to get stressed about.
Darren, you mentioned earlier on about owning your time. Give me a bit more insight into that. What does that mean?
So the one thing that we can't deliver on this podcast is more time. Okay, so you will still have 24 hours in a day, 7 days a week. But it's how we use that time. So how many times do we attend a meeting where we don't really add value? We don't really know why we're there. Take responsibility. Go, I don't need to attend. Or as a leader, do we attend a meeting because instead of sending someone else, we feel like we have to be there? And actually it's simple things like that where you go, how can I add most value? And really asking yourself those questions that then we can start planning out our week. I mean, we talked about a to-do list. Some people want the answer to be the to-do list. Well, I'll just write a list and it's all done. No, you've actually got to do it. And when things get added to the to-do list, it's because you've added them to the to-do list. Someone has asked you to do it, but you've agreed and added it to your to-do list. So again, there's all those steps there where you could have said no or started to delegate, and those delegations can then be growth opportunities for others. Actually step back, look at that bigger picture. Where do I want to spend my time, and where do I want others to spend their time, so we are both in that growth area?
Yeah, I get it. So we talk a lot, don't we, about making our own choices, and if someone is giving us something to do and we add it to our to-do list, ultimately we're responsible for that. That is our decision, so we're adding it in there. For me, a big part of time management is being able to say no, which is a real skill in itself anyway. Not a recent example of someone on a course of mine when they were talking about, additional responsibilities and taking on more tasks. And he was a manager, and he said in front of the whole group, all I do is just work a little bit longer. You're like, yes, but there's still only 24 hours in a day. You can't just keep working longer. So that ability to say no and coach back is really vital. Again, Laura, is that, how do we develop that skill around being able to say no?
There's a little bit of kind of courage involved in that sometimes, and it kind of links to what Darren's been saying about taking responsibility for ourselves as well. But also recognising that our role as a manager and a leader is not to do a whole team's worth of work, but to actually facilitate your team in doing as much as they can do as well, and giving them the opportunities to do that, the support if they need it, so that ultimately what you've got is a self-sustaining, rather than kind of the manager almost being the puppet master behind the scenes, having to make sure everybody's moving in the right direction. I think for me, I came out of education before I came into this role, and that definitely was one of those scenarios where you could just work and work and work until there weren't any more hours. But actually that has a massive impact on your health, and sometimes appreciating that, particularly in the terms of education, a term, for example, it's a marathon, it's not a sprint. And sometimes there are other areas, other industries that we can also see that mindset creeping in, that we feel that pressure, like we have to get everything done right now and we have to do it ourselves. But actually take a look at it, a little bit more objectively. There's this saying, and I was thinking of it as Darren was speaking, is like, don't count the days, but make the days count. Okay, nice. Which I really like. And kind of look at actually, how am I spending my time? Is this the most effective use of my time? Am I saying yes when I could be saying no to things? And actually, we talk a lot about our coaching approaches. Can we coach that back? It's not a case always of just going, well, no, I'm not going to do that. But actually asking, so if I take this on, would I be able to push this back? Like what can I put down in order to take this on? So looking at it with a sense of balance as well, rather than just collecting up kind of more and more and more tasks to do. So yeah, asking the question rather than outwardly saying no, and sometimes even asking when does this need to be done by, rather than kind of outwardly saying no. Just make them aware that there are other things going on, because otherwise it builds this culture, doesn't it, where everybody's doing the same thing. So actually having the courage to have those conversations, to sort of give a soft no or ask a question in reply instead, it's much more effective.
And it is a skill you learn, and I'm just reflecting back as you're talking there, is something that I had to do when I was a little bit younger in my early management career. I made a conscious decision to be better at saying no, and it was about being courageous and being brave. And I remember someone in my team asking me, like, Dan, have you got that ticked off for me, whatever it was? And I just went, no. And I said nothing else to it. The response was really interesting, because she didn't know what to say and I didn't really know what to say off the back of it. But it was me trying to make, right, I need to be assertive around this. I need to practice this skill of saying no. Nowadays, I'll do a bit of a no, because, and it's not necessarily justifying to someone else why you haven't done it, but then it's opening up conversations around it. But it's definitely a learned skill, but we can all do that. One of the other things you mentioned there is, and this is one of my favourite sayings, is like, if I say yes to this, what am I saying no to? Because we can't do everything. We've already said in the first 5 minutes or so that there's only 24 hours in a day, so something's got to give, and that's a nice way to manage up as well, is say, actually, yeah, absolutely, I'd love to take on this new project. Do you want me to delegate something else? Do you want me to finish this other one first? Do you want to take it back? Who's taking responsibility for this other thing that I can't do, or does the new thing, can that wait? To about getting clarity around it as well. Guys, what's the impact of poor time management? What happens if we're not being effective at managing our time and other people's? What happens?
So for me, one of the biggest worries with poor time management is it creates a toxic culture. So actually, a lot of people that talk about, I'll just work longer. Well, if you're a role model in that business and you work longer hours, what's that going to tell the rest of your employees? That they're expected to work longer hours? And then there'll be like a competition going on that, well, and how about, that one parent that's got to go slightly earlier to pick up their kids from school? Well, how are they going to feel? Well, the chances are they're going to pick up their kids, go home and start working because that's the culture, and not get that full work-life balance. And I think that's the danger when we start looking at time as just unlimited, is we need to understand that we are a role model for that business, and the culture that we create, other people start to replicate. So that's probably, for me, the biggest concern around poor time management.
If I look at things from an organisational standpoint, if you're creating this very toxic culture around time management, you're only going to have people kind of working harder and longer for a certain amount of time before you have burnout, before you have absenteeism, presenteeism, declines in things like staff well-being, staff satisfaction, even customer satisfaction. It has that real ripple effect there, because poor time management and excessive workloads, it makes people stressed, and that has a really detrimental effect. So yeah, sometimes it can be hard, maybe for senior leaders and such to see it at such an individual level, if they're if they are have a tendency to be a workaholic themselves, that they might expect that. So sometimes actually looking at it from the other side and saying this is going to have a quantitative impact as well as the qualitative one. You will see staff retention will drop, for example, because people won't keep up with the workload, and however much they love their job, it's not going to be enough. So yeah, looking after our time and treating it like an investment, I think, is really important. Like Darren says, being respectful of people's time as well. Yeah,
not just your own time, but other people, your team as well. I like that terminology around making it an investment. I think in the workplace, people tend to get stressed when we're overwhelmed, when there's too much going on. Yeah. So we're running multiple projects at any one time, and we've got to have reviews with our team, and we've got to go and do a presentation to the board, and we've got to get this training up and running, and all sorts of different things. Whereas actually, if we took each of those different things and we said, right, you've got 2 weeks for this one, 2 months for that one, whatever it might be, that becomes a lot more manageable.
Yeah, definitely.
And I think what we're not saying is working a few extra hours on the odd week is unacceptable.
Yeah.
Because actually it's about those peaks and troughs and managing, isn't it? When we've got a deadline coming, yeah, we might put in an extended week, but I'm owning that, and I'm taking responsibility that actually I might be spending a bit of my home life on a bit of work. But on another point, I won't need to be able to do that. So again, it's with that responsibility that sits with me.
So what's the responsibility of the manager or the L&D professionals, head of department, in terms of managing and supporting other people with their time?
So again, I think it's about thinking about that bigger picture, that strategy of where we want to go, and starting to create that coaching culture. So it's about asking those right questions. We can easily move into a command and control position where we are telling people what they need to do. And when we're in that command and control position, we're still taking the responsibility. That sort of means that your employees will just try and get that work done, whatever the cost to them and their mental health and all aspects. I think when we start on what can you achieve and starting setting those boundaries, they're starting to take that responsibility of their own time to say, well, I can achieve this, I might need some support on that. And you're like, okay then. Or you might go, here's a piece of work, how long will it take you to get this done? Well, I think it'll be about a month. Okay, well, if we needed it in 3 weeks, what additional support would you require? Putting that onus back on the employee instead of us saying, this needs to be done in 3 weeks, I think changes the behaviours that we want to see.
See this, wouldn't we, in terms of managers? Imagine I was your manager and I've got this project, I'm under pressure, not you, but I'm saying to you, I need you to do this. How do we control that situation?
Asking the right questions, so not necessarily leading straight away with like a no or you can't do that, but maybe explain that, okay, so I can do this, but it will need to take priority over something else, possibly. For me, the biggest thing for HR and L&D professionals to have to think about in terms of time management is actually look at people's job roles, look at things like flexible working now. Are you still expecting someone to do the same amount of work, in fewer hours? And is that boiling over, into other areas of their life? And then they can set the standard for those things where, don't have senior managers pushing this pressure down the line, because that does create that toxicity in terms of culture. Actually, our KPIs, is the strategy reasonable? Is it being set appropriately? Is it being communicated so that everybody understands where these pressures are coming from? And that starts at the very, very top. So we have to be mindful of that. And I think sometimes asking the right questions or just reflecting that back as we're managing up, so that they can give us that clarity, so that if we're then, as that middle manager, having to de-escalate it down to our team, we're really clear on why are we doing that, why is it important, is this a marathon or a sprint, is it we just need to push through for now, or is this a new way of working? So just making sure that clarity is there, really, and then people feel certain, and we know that's really important for their well-being.
So if we look at top skills around time management, it's a word that I've heard several times already is the word clarity. And I'm not sure we'd always associate that with time management, but clearly that's important because we've mentioned it quite a lot of times. Let's unpack some of the other skills around that as well. Laura just mentioned certainty. Tell me a little bit about what that means. And I think that comes from coaching background.
Yeah, definitely. So there's certain things in kind of neuroscience that we need as humans to feel safe, to feel secure, and certainty and autonomy are two of the key elements of that. So that really impacts our time management, and vice versa, our time management will impact on that. So when we're in that kind of firefighting and we're just dealing with things relentlessly, there's no certainty because you don't know what you're dealing with next, how long it's going to last, but you don't have autonomy either, you're being entirely reactive. So the more we can find ways to create certainty, whether that's through different strategies that we might use, time blocking, habit stacking, or whether that's through kind of, looking at something in advance, planning things out in a way that is realistic. All of those things can help us to create certainty and autonomy, even in times when that might just be part of our job, that we have to be reactive. Everybody has to firefight every now and then.
Similar to what you were saying earlier on, Darren, actually, that sometimes we do have to do a few extra hours, and we'll recognise that in our team, that, some days we're travelling around the country and you do longer hours, but then we can get we're lucky, I guess, privileged, we can get our time back elsewhere. So there's a bit of that in it. That's why autonomy is just right near the top of the list for me. We know human nature, we thrive on autonomy. We don't like being told what to do in any walk of our lives. So autonomy is really important with our teams and with ourselves as well. What else have we got, Darren? What's at the top of the list for you in terms of skills?
So for me, one of the exercises that I done was creating awareness for myself. So as a data person, awareness is my data. So what I done was a life balance exercise. So actually, where do I spend my time? And we can do this in a working sense. So where do I spend my time at work? Or we can do this as a whole life. How do I spend my time? And actually from that gives us an insight is, well, is this in line with my values? So actually, if I'm spending most of my time at work doing tasks, but I'm a leader and one of my values is developing others, well, actually, other people aren't seeing that. So when we start linking into Batari's box with our behaviours affect other people's attitudes, and we look at the beliefs leading on to behaviours with other people's beliefs on us based on our behaviours, then we need to understand that where we spend our time, that's where people's beliefs about us will be. So it was really interesting getting that awareness of where I spend my time versus then where do I want to spend my time? Because then we can start focusing on where we want to be instead of where we currently are.
If we just blown time management wide open, we've gone way deeper, which is great, because I think when we look at time management on the surface, it's about, can I turn up on time? Can I get my team to turn up to a meeting on time? But it goes far deeper than that. Give us a bit of insight then. What did this balance look like? What did you do? What was the process?
So again, it's separating a task. So I try and separate the task in two categories. So is it a day-to-day task or is it a development task? So is it going to be a space where I can grow? And the simplest way I can describe it is a bathroom. We will clean a bathroom that is just a day-to-day task. And we normally prioritise those tasks because you can tell when a bathroom's not clean. But actually a developmental task is I'm going to repaint that whole bathroom. So I'm going to make it sparkling and clean again. And actually how we spend our time then focuses on whether we're growing as a person. So, you know, a lot of habits of people will be cooking, for example. Well, that can be a day-to-day task, or it can be a development opportunity. You might have a new recipe, new piece of equipment. But actually, all the algorithms on our online shopping push us towards buying the same ingredients every single week. And us as human beings, we want those development opportunities. Exciting, it's new, it's fun. But because the day-to-day tasks are easier to spot and easier to tick on our to-do list, that's normally where we go. And at work, we've got to think of those same things, because actually rotas, for example, is, I've got to get rotas done again. Okay, that's fine, a day-to-day task. But what we've also got to understand is our day-to-day task can be someone else's growth opportunity. So let's manage all those tasks that we might see as, I've got to get that done, and actually go, well, that person really likes that detail, that knowledge, and they could really grow by doing that role, and use delegation as a growth opportunity. And that will then create space for us to move into that.